Look at Joshua chapter 11. And in Joshua chapter 11, you're going to see the conquests in northern Canaan. And in Joshua chapter 11, more kings and armies are gathered together against Joshua and Israel. As you'll see in Joshua 11, 1 through 4, it says, "And it came to pass when Jabin, king of Hazor, had heard these things, that he sent to Jobab, king of Madon, and to the king of Shimron, and to the king of Akshaph, and to the kings that were on the north of the mountains, and of the plain south of Chinnereth, and in the valley, and in the borders of Dor on the west, and to the Canaanite on the east and on the west, and to the Amorite, and the Hittite, and the Perizzite, and the Jebusite in the mountains, and to the Hivite under Hermon in the land of Mizpah. And they went out, they and all their hosts with them, much people, even as the sand that is upon the seashore in multitude, with horses and chariots, very many." So, everybody gathered together against him. Like I tell you, it pictures the armies of the world gathered together against Israel and the Lord Jesus Christ at the second coming. But the Lord has promised Joshua that he will have victory. In verse 5 it says, "When all these kings were met together, they came and pitched together at the waters of Merom to fight against Israel. And the Lord said unto Joshua, Be not afraid because of them, for tomorrow about this time will I deliver them up all slain before Israel. Thou shalt howl their horses and burn their chariots with fire." So, I want to talk about the fruit of victory. There is some fruit you must have in order to get victory in your day-to-day walk. And there is some fruit you will get for getting the victory. The Lord Jesus has already gotten the victory for you and given you a spot in eternity with Him. But will you fight the good fight down here while you wait? Here are a few ways that Joshua and Israel ended up with the victory. And we should apply these to our spiritual warfare today in our everyday life. You're under spiritual warfare. Joshua and Israel was under physical warfare. For you, it's spiritual warfare. The weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but they're spiritual. The first thing is to take orders. You take orders. That's the first thing you need to do is, can you examine your life and look at it and see, can you take orders? Because in Joshua 11:15 through 16, you'll see that's what Joshua did. "And the Lord commanded Moses his servant." That's what Moses did. He did the commands of God. The Lord commanded Moses his servant. So did Moses command Joshua, and so did Joshua. Joshua just did it. He left nothing undone of all that the Lord commanded Moses. So Joshua took all that land, the hills, and all the south country, and all the land of Goshen, and the valley, and the plain, and the mountain of Israel, and the valley of the same. Moses did what God said. Joshua did what Moses said. Joshua obeys and takes the land. Even from the Mount Halak, it says in verse 17, that goeth up to Seir, even unto Belgad in the valley of Lebanon, under Mount Hermon, and all their kings he took, and smote them and slew them. Just imagine the scene. You got Joshua coming out there, just smiting them. No fear, because he's got that promise. The Lord said, "Be not afraid." So you got to take orders from the Almighty. To ever have any victory, you have to take orders. Moses and Joshua were successful because they listened to God. In this life, if you would just take orders from people that you're supposed to take orders from, you're going to succeed. You go to work, you got to take orders. That's what you're doing all day long. You got to listen to your supervisor. You got to listen to the customers. In any field, in any situation, you're going to have to take orders from somebody. I mean, you have professional athletes making millions and millions of dollars, more than their coach makes, and they're taking orders from their coach. You see? You know, after having children, I realized how refreshing it is just to have someone listen to the orders you're given. Because a lot of times kids will not listen to your orders. So when you get around a person that does listen to orders, it's very refreshing. Be that refreshment for somebody. Take orders. And the Lord, the Almighty, believes to obey is better than sacrifice. 1 Samuel 15:22. He believes to obey is better than sacrifice. The Lord is looking for saints to open His book and keep His commandments. 1 John 5:3. 1 John 5:3 says, "For this is the love of God, that we keep His commandments, and His commandments are not grievous." Now, I don't keep all the commandments. I'm going to mess up because of this stupid flesh. But we need to try to do our best to keep His commandments. You know, they're not suggestions written in the Bible. They're orders from our Master, the captain of our salvation. The Lord wants you to show your love for Him by obeying of your own free will. He wants to, somebody says, why didn't He just make us to always obey? Well, then it ain't like true love. If it's true love, you do it because you love God. The love of Christ constraineth us, you see. And it says Joshua, I like that phrase, left nothing undone that the Lord told him to do through Moses. And when you leave something undone, it can leave a small crack to give place to the devil. When you leave stuff undone. And you see all kinds of pictures of that through the Bible, like with Saul. He was supposed to kill all of them, all the enemies, but he left some alive. He left the king alive. He left the women alive, and it left a crack in there for the devil to get in. Ephesians 4:27 says, "Neither give place to the devil." Are you waking up every day and walking circumspectly, looking all around, checking things from every side? Ephesians 5:15, walk circumspectly, examining yourselves. Examine yourselves, 2 Corinthians 13:5. If you leave something undone, it can cost you the victory for that day. And you got a battle that happens in a moment. You got battles that happen every day. All right, you're not going to win each one, but if you want the victory, you can't leave stuff undone. You got to check every crack and crevice. What if when your alarm sounded in the morning, you began walking with God, communing with God, doing what He wanted you to do? You'd have the victory, at least for that moment, and then you got to go on to try to get the victory in the next moment, and in the next moment, and in the next moment, and for the whole day, you see. You're fighting little battles, spiritual battles throughout the day. So you got to take orders, though, from the Almighty. You got to take orders from your authority. Moses did what the Lord said, and Joshua did what Moses said. And by doing so, he was obeying God. When you obey your authority, you're obeying God. The Lord gives us pastors as authority figures. The Lord gives you bosses as authority figures. The Lord gives you parents as authority figures. Like I said, an athlete has to listen to his coach. A student has to obey his teacher. You got to take orders from the police, from the government. They are ordained of God, Romans 13:1. Everybody's got to listen to somebody. Everybody's taking orders somewhere. So the best thing to do is swallow your pride and just do what God says and what the authority in your life says. Quit worrying so much about telling everybody else what to do and start focus on doing and following the directions that you're supposed to follow from your superiors. You got most people that come into the workplace, I've noticed, they want to tell everybody else what to do, but the moment somebody tells them what to do, they don't like it. So you got to obey the authority figures in your life up until they cross God's authority. And like Acts 5:29 says, it's better to obey God rather than men. So that's where you draw the line with anybody. Your boss, your husband, your parents, anybody. If what they're telling you to do goes against God, then you obey God rather than men. That's the line of authority. So you got to take orders. The next thing, you got to take the time. In verse 18, in Joshua 11 and verse 18, it says, Joshua made war a long time with all those kings. You got to take the time. He took orders and he takes the time. You got to take the time to learn war. Now for Joshua, he learned physical warfare. Now, I don't know no physical warfare. But Joshua had to take the time to learn physical warfare. We got to take the time to learn spiritual warfare. He had stuck his neck out to get experience in war. He was continuing to war a good warfare because that's exactly what he was commanded to do. Joshua has warred a long time. Think about it. How much time have you spent learning war by reading the greatest book on spiritual warfare, the King James Bible itself? You know, most Christians spend zero time allowing the Lord to teach their hands to war and their fingers to fight. Like David talked about in Psalm 144 and verse 1, the Lord taught his hands to war and his fingers to fight. In physical warfare, for you it's spiritual. Imagine an army that never went to boot camp. Imagine a pilot not going to flight school. Imagine a dentist not going to dentist school. You have to take time and learn spiritual warfare. Ephesians 6. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Then one day, you can get the fruit of victory. Rest. That's something that you'll get. That's one of the fruits you'll get one day. Christians don't want to redeem the time, but there's coming a time at the judgment seat of Christ where they will wish they had used their time wisely. I'm going to wish I had used my time more wisely. But you got to take the time to learn war. You got to take the time to learn patience. You know, I guarantee you Joshua had a lot of patience because tribulation worketh patience. He was in Egypt under hard bondage. Remember, Joshua was around for all of it. Back in Exodus in Egypt under hard bondage, he was in the wilderness for 40 years. He had seen all the setbacks. You know, you can't war a long time if you don't have patience. Most Christians won't stick with anything long enough to learn patience. Most workers won't stick with their job long enough to learn patience. You know, I'm working on a huge journey through the scriptures. In my inner leave, the wide margin, King James Bible, my goal is to get every single book marked up. It takes a lot of patience. Part of the war is learning how to war. And it takes time, takes patience to learn. Some battles are harder than others, and you're not going to win every battle. But if the Lord wants you to fight it, you take him with you and you get the victory. Joshua took every type of battle that came his way, whether it was in the hills, the valley, the plain, or the mountain, just like it said in Joshua 11:16. So Joshua took all that land, the hills, and all the south country, and all the land of Goshen, and the valley, and the plain, and the mountain of Israel, and the valley of the same. He took all that. He took every battle that came his way. And in verse 17, what does it say? Even from the Mount Halak that goeth up to Seir, even unto Belgad in the valley of Lebanon under Mount Hermon, and all their kings he took, and smote them, and slew them. He took all the kings. I don't know if Joshua personally went up and grabbed those kings, snatched their crown, and smote them, but can you imagine doing that? Imagine doing that in your spiritual warfare. One of the things I like to do is go through the Kings and Chronicles and do a little study on every single king in 1st, 2nd Kings, 1st, 2nd Chronicles, and in Samuel. And you're taking the kings. You're adding that to your arsenal. You got all those kings down in the Bible, just like Joshua took the kings. Each time you persevere and just do it, just study, you're getting stronger and stronger. You're learning war. Each time you persevere through temptation and the daily grind of fighting the flesh, it's like you're going to the darkest corners of your heart and yanking the wicked king off your heart, stealing his crown, getting another crown, and you're getting another crown to throw at Jesus Christ's feet and putting him on the throne of your heart. You just got to be long-suffering, make war a long time with the flesh, make war a long time with your idols, make war a long time with anything that is against Jesus Christ. So you got to take orders, you got to take time, then you got to take the mountain. Then you can take the mountain. It says in verse 18, Joshua made war a long time with all those kings. Verse 19, there was not a city that made peace with the children of Israel, save the Hivites, the inhabitants of Gibeon. All other they took in battle. You're not going to have much peace down here in the sense of the world making peace with you, stuff like that. But you got to take the mountain. There was not a city that made peace. Because verse 20 said, for it was of the Lord to harden their hearts, that they should come against Israel in battle, that he might destroy them utterly, and that they might have no favor, but that he might destroy them as the Lord commanded Moses. So you got to take the mountain. You take orders, you take the time, you persevere, you take the mountain. You got to knock down the walls. If you're going to take the mountain, you got to knock down the walls. So there was not a city that made peace other than the Gibeonites. You remember the Gibeonites that deceived them back there in chapter 9. But Joshua took them all in battle. Whatever you have in your life that isn't at peace with Jesus Christ, it's got to be knocked down. Just knock it down. Not only did those enemies dwell in mountains with great and high walls, they also had their hearts hardened. Just like people today, they have their hearts hardened with a big wall. With a concrete, metal, steel, iron wall, whatever. We have such a high turnover rate, like at work, that I train a new person almost every week. And when I witness to them, the hardest thing is knocking down those walls around their heart. And if you're going to reach the people at work with the gospel, you're going to have to be their friend. You're going to have to understand them. And then you can know what verses to use from your war manual, the Bible, that will knock that wall down that's around their heart. Verse 20, look at verse 20, it says, it was of the Lord to harden their hearts, that they should come against Israel in battle, that he might destroy them utterly, and that they might have no favor, but that he might destroy them as the Lord commanded Moses. And at that time came Joshua, and cut off the Anakims from the mountains, and from Heben, and from Deber, and from Anab, and from all the mountains of Judah, and from all the mountains of Israel. Joshua destroyed them utterly with their cities. There was none of the Anakims left in the land of the children of Israel, only in Gaza, in Gath, and in Ashdod there remained. And Joshua took the whole land, according to all that the Lord said unto Moses, and Joshua gave it for an inheritance unto Israel, according to their divisions by their tribes, and the land rested from war. So, verse 20 said, it was of the Lord to harden their hearts, that they should come against Israel in battle. Perhaps the Lord has surrounded you by all these hard-hearted people at work, because he wants you to find out how to penetrate the hard wall and win them to him. You may have a wall around your own heart that's keeping you from doing what you need to do to get the victory. But if you're saved, within you is the God that can make your heart soft. Job 23:16. God makes your heart soft. Sometimes as a Christian you can get cold and bitter. It happens to all of us, and you can just feel the mountains and the walls crowding around your heart. And it has to be the good word of God to penetrate them. You got to take the mountain, you got to knock down the walls, you got to knock down the giant. In verse 21, Joshua cuts off the Anakims, and those are the giants that Israel was afraid of back in Numbers 13. Something amazing about Joshua is that he was with Israel back there in Numbers 13 when they went to spy out the land, and he knew what he was getting himself into, and he still went to fight them. He knew how big they were. This battle against the Anakims is like the boss battle at the end of a video game, and possibly the only one that's keeping you from completion. Sometimes you're your own giant in your own life. You know, if Paul said, what did hinder you? You'd say, me, yourself. You need to beat your own flesh down. That's your giant, your own flesh sometimes. You need to beat your own flesh down, go in and get the victory. And when you conquer one giant sin in your life, set your crosshairs on the next one. Fight them until the rapture. And by the time Joshua was done, it says in verse 22 that there was none of the Anakims left in the land of the children of Israel. So Joshua and Israel swept through, took out all the enemies, just as Jesus Christ will at the second coming. And verse 23 says, and the whole land rested from war. After the second coming, that is exactly what will happen as well. The whole land rested from war. Rest is a fruit of the victory. Isaiah 2:4, Micah 4:3 talks about there being a time when Israel won't learn war anymore. One of these days, the spiritual warfare will also be over, and we won't be fighting against principalities and powers no more. We won't be fighting the flesh no more. Jesus Christ has given you the ultimate victory. He got you salvation from death, hell, and the grave. And one of these days, you can rest. He has an inheritance reserved for you. But if you fight these little side battles down here for him, he's going to give you even more inheritance. In verse 23, Joshua gives an inheritance to Israel according to their tribes and divisions. That's exactly, see in Joshua 11:23 it says, so Joshua took the whole land according to all that the Lord said unto Moses, and Joshua gave it for an inheritance unto Israel, according to their divisions by their tribes, and the land rested from war. Joshua, a picture of Jesus Christ. You go to war and fight for the Lord down here, he's going to give you more inheritance one day. Do you want to reap the fruits of victory for all eternity?